Okay, so this is going to sound weird, but bear with me. I'm a 32-year-old guy, married. Well, technically still married, but I'll get to that. And until a few months ago, I thought my biggest headache in life was my students confusing he and she in English class. I teach English as a second language, and I've always joked with my wife that my classroom mistakes were more dramatic than any soap opera. Turns out, I was dead wrong. My real soap opera was happening right at home. The first signs of trouble were subtle. My wife started spending more time helping one of my older students after class. I didn't think much of it. She speaks English fluently, and I figured she just enjoyed being useful. But then, I noticed things. The student, a guy in his late 20s, was making the same dumb mistakes I corrected a dozen times already. Misusing since and for, mixing up advice and advise, saying, I am agree, like it was a mantra. And instead of rolling her eyes like she usually did when people butchered English, she'd laugh. Actually laugh. At first, I told myself not to overthink it. I mean, people laugh at mistakes. It happens. But there was this one night, after class, when I walked into the staff room and caught them sitting too close. She was correcting him on people is versus people are, her hand on his notebook, her smile way too bright. My gut twisted, but I said nothing. I just stood there, nodding like an idiot, while they both looked guilty for half a second and then acted normal again. I wish I could say that was the moment I confronted her. But instead, I swallowed it. Told myself I was paranoid. Told myself I'd seen too many dramas in the teacher's lounge. And yet, a seed of doubt had been planted. That was the beginning of it all. The betrayal, the unraveling, and the bizarre way my students' most common mistakes ended up teaching me lessons about my marriage. So here's where things started spiraling. The thing about teaching English is that you can't help but hear patterns. Mistakes repeat themselves like bad background music. And suddenly, those mistakes were showing up in my marriage. One evening, my wife came home late. She claimed she was helping that same student practice his speaking skills at a cafe. My first thought, great, he's probably still saying I go to home instead of I go home. But my second thought hit me harder. Why the hell does she need to be the one helping him outside class at night? When I asked, she got defensive. She snapped, you're being jealous for no reason. He just needs more confidence. And maybe that would have worked on me if she hadn't slipped and said, we were talking about our childhoods. Our, not his English, not his grammar, their childhoods. I remember sitting there, staring at her, thinking, this isn't about phrasal verbs anymore. It felt like one of my students had turned in an essay that looked normal on the surface but had a hidden message between the lines. And I was too blind to read it. I barely slept that night. My brain kept looping over the first of the 10 mistakes my students always make. Mistake number 1, confusing present perfect with simple past. Students say, I have seen him yesterday. Correction, I saw him yesterday. And there I was, lying in bed, wondering if my wife was out there making the same mistake, mixing up past and present. Maybe what she called friendship was already something else. Maybe what she said was happening had already happened, and I was just late to realize it. That thought felt like a punch in the gut, and it was only the beginning. The real punch came a week later. I walked into my classroom early and found a notebook on the desk, his notebook. Curiosity, and maybe paranoia, got the best of me. I flipped it open. At first, it was the usual nonsense. I am agree. She don't like pizza. I have 25 years old. Stuff that made me sigh more than anything else. But then I turned the page, and I swear my stomach dropped. In between practice sentences, there were little scribbles, personal notes, almost like diary entries. She told me I am special. She correct me with love. We talk about future, with my wife. I just sat there, holding the notebook like it was a live grenade. Betrayal doesn't always scream, it whispers. And in this case, it was written in broken English with missing articles and the wrong prepositions. I wanted to storm out, confront both of them, flip the desk if I had to. But instead, I froze. I thought about mistake number 2, confusing countable and uncountable nouns. Students say, she gave me many advices. Correction, she gave me a lot of advice. And here's the twisted part. My wife was giving him plenty of advice, all right. But it wasn't the kind you'd expect in an English class. It was the kind that crossed lines. And suddenly, I felt uncountable emotions. Anger, shock, sadness, but mostly shame, because I realized I'd been ignoring the signs. Just like my students ignore corrections, pretending they've got it when they clearly don't. I was pretending my marriage was fine when deep down, I knew it wasn't. That night, I didn't say a word to her. I just lay next to her, staring at the ceiling, wondering how many more mistakes were hidden between the lines. It didn't take long for the cracks to widen. A couple of days later, I caught them again. This time, not even trying to hide it. Class had ended, students were trickling out, and there they were, standing by the window, her hand on his arm as he laughed over some grammar slip. I swear, I heard him say, "I will marry with her someday." Not, marry her, marry with her. My chest tightened. The mistake was laughable in class, but here, it sounded like a threat. Like he was practicing the future tense of my worst nightmare. That's when mistake number 3 screamed in my head, using the wrong prepositions. Students say, "I'm good in English." Correction, I'm good at English. And here was this guy, good at stealing my wife, while I stood there, good in pretending everything was fine. I didn't confront them. Not yet. Instead, I walked away. My anger was boiling, but something else was rising too, fear. Because what if, just like with prepositions, I was missing the smallest detail that changed the whole meaning? What if I accused her, and she threw it back in my face as just helping a student? That night, I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. My brain was rewriting every conversation, every laugh, every late return home. Betrayal is weird. It doesn't hit like lightning. It drips, slowly, until you're soaked. And the worst part? I was still hoping I was wrong, hoping it was all a misunderstanding. Like one of those student errors that looks huge, but is just a slip of the tongue. But deep down, I knew. Some mistakes aren't accidents. Some mistakes are choices. The breaking point came during one of those study nights she claimed she had to help him with. She left the house with her laptop, books, and a smile that looked rehearsed. I told myself not to spiral, but my gut wouldn't shut up. So, like an idiot, I drove to the cafe she said they'd be at. I parked outside, heart pounding, and there they were. Not hunched over grammar drills. Not practicing pronunciation. No, she was leaning in, laughing at something on his phone, her hand brushing his. And he had that same notebook open, but instead of sentences, I saw a doodle of her name surrounded by little hearts. I nearly lost it right there. But instead, I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture. Proof. Cold, undeniable proof. My hands were shaking so bad, I almost dropped the phone. I drove home in silence, replaying mistake number 4, wrong word forms. Students say, "He is boring," when they mean he is bored. Correction, he is bored. And damn, wasn't that me? Not boring, but bored. Bored of the lies. Bored of playing the fool. Bored of hearing my wife twist her words the way my students twisted theirs. By the time she came home hours later, I already had the picture pulled up on my phone, waiting. My chest felt like it was about to cave in. When I showed her, she froze. For a second, her mask slipped. But then she did what cheaters always do. She tried to gaslight me. "You don't understand. It's innocent. He just needs extra practice. You're imagining things." Imagining? If only I were. That was the first night I slept on the couch. Sleeping on the couch felt like exile in my own house. I kept staring at the ceiling, trying to connect the dots between my marriage and the classroom mistakes I'd corrected 1,000 times. The betrayal wasn't loud. It was quiet, creeping in like a grammar error no one notices until it ruins the whole essay. The next morning, she acted normal. Made coffee. Asked if I wanted toast. Like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't shown her a picture of her basically on a date with my student. That's when my anger started boiling into something sharper, clarity. I remembered mistake number 5, articles. Students say, "I bought car." Correction, I bought a car. Articles are small, but they matter. Leave them out, and the sentence feels wrong. Leave respect out of a marriage, and the whole relationship collapses. That's exactly what had happened. She left out the small things: honesty, respect, loyalty. And now the sentence of our marriage didn't make sense anymore. I went to work that day in a fog. My students were buzzing around me, making their usual mistakes, but I couldn't even laugh about it. When one girl said, "Teacher, I am very boring," I almost told her, join the club. Instead, I just corrected her with a smile I didn't feel. The betrayal was eating me alive, but the worst part? I still loved her. I hated her, but I loved her. And that contradiction was tearing me apart. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with my phone in my hand, staring at divorce lawyers' websites, but I couldn't click. Not yet. Not when part of me was still praying I was wrong. The denial stage didn't last long. 2 days later, I came home earlier than usual. Her shoes weren't by the door, but the lights were on in the living room. For a split second, I thought maybe she was finally waiting for me, ready to talk things through. But then I heard it. His voice. His laugh. I froze in the hallway, my heart pounding so loud I swear they must have heard it. When I peeked around the corner, there he was, my student, sitting on my couch, eating chips out of the bowl we used for movie nights. She was next to him, pointing at something on his phone like they were teenagers on a date. And just like that, I remembered mistake number 6, subject, verb agreement. Students say, she have a dog. Correction, she has a dog. And there she was. She had a student. She had someone else. She didn't just have me anymore. I wanted to storm in, throw him out, scream until my throat bled. But instead, I walked straight to our bedroom, grabbed my pillow and a blanket, and slammed the door behind me. It was the only way I could keep from doing something stupid. That night, while they were laughing in the living room like I didn't exist, I lay in bed thinking about how betrayal feels a lot like bad grammar. One wrong word, one wrong choice, and the whole meaning changes. And in that moment, I knew our meaning had changed. The next morning was worse than the night before. He was gone, of course, but the empty chip bowl on the coffee table felt like evidence at a crime scene. She tried to act casual, humming while making coffee, like I hadn't just witnessed her turning our home into his playground. I couldn't hold it in anymore. Why was he here? I asked, my voice shaking. She didn't even flinch. You're overreacting. He just needed help. His exam is coming up. Exam. Right. Because nothing says exam prep like chips on my couch at 10 p.m. That's when mistake number 7, false friends, hit me. Students sometimes say, actually, I am very sensible. They mean sensitive. Correction, actually, I am very sensitive. False friends. Words that look like something you trust, but mean something else entirely. And wasn't that exactly what she had become? My wife looked like my partner, spoke like my partner, but the meaning had changed. She wasn't who I thought she was anymore. I told her, you're lying to me. She crossed her arms, rolled her eyes, and muttered, you're paranoid. Paranoid. Another false friend. Because paranoia means imagining things that aren't real. But what I saw? The notebook, the cafe, the couch, it was all too real. That day, I walked into class like a ghost. My students' mistakes blurred together, and for the first time, I didn't even bother correcting them. I just stood there, letting them speak broken English, while my marriage broke in silence. By the time the weekend came, I was running on fumes. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, and every time my phone buzzed, I half expected it to be him texting her. The house felt like a prison, so I decided to clear my head and take a jog. Halfway down the street, I saw them. Together. At the bus stop. She was leaning against the glass, and he was standing too close, smiling like he'd already won. My stomach flipped, and for a second, I thought I was going to throw up right there on the sidewalk. He noticed me first. His grin faltered, and he muttered something I couldn't hear. She turned, her eyes wide, like a kid caught stealing candy. And what did she say? Not, I'm sorry. Not, this isn't what it looks like. She said, it's not serious. I laughed, out loud, because all I could think of was mistake number 8, overusing very. Students say, it's very, very big. Correction, it's huge. And here she was, saying, it's not serious. But it was. It was very, very serious. It was huge. It was the collapse of everything I thought we had. I didn't yell, didn't curse. I just looked at her, then at him, and turned around. Jogged home with tears burning my eyes, feeling like the world's biggest idiot. When I got back, I collapsed on the couch, the same couch he'd sat on, and I realized something brutal. Maybe she wasn't making a mistake. Maybe she was making a choice. And that hurt more than anything. I avoided her the whole evening. She came home late, tiptoeing around like I wouldn't notice. But how do you not notice when your wife smells like someone else's cologne? I sat there in the dark, waiting. She froze when she saw me. "You're scaring me," she said. And maybe I did look scary, bloodshot eyes, clenched jaw, shaking hands. But the truth? I wasn't angry anymore. I was broken. I asked her one last time, "Do you love him?" She hesitated. That pause was longer than any answer she could have given. Then she whispered, "I don't know." And that was it. That was the final nail. I thought about mistake number 9, pronunciation problems. Students say beach, but it sounds like bitch. Or they say sheet, but it comes out as something else entirely. One wrong sound, and the meaning flips. One wrong choice, and a marriage collapses. That hesitation, her "I don't know," was her mispronunciation of love. It sounded close to the truth, but it meant something completely different. I didn't yell, didn't beg. I just said, "Then you've already answered me." And I walked to the bedroom, locked the door, and let myself cry like I hadn't cried since I was a kid. That night, I knew we weren't fixing this. No amount of correction, no lesson plan, no patience could put this sentence back together. The next morning, I made my decision. I packed a bag quietly while she slept, feeling a strange mixture of relief and sorrow. I left a note on the kitchen counter. "I hope one day you understand what you lost." No anger, no insults, just truth. Walking out of that house felt like walking out of my own body. I could still see her in the living room, curled up on the couch like nothing had happened, or maybe like everything had happened and she didn't care. As I drove away, my mind wandered back to my students. Mistake number 10, direct translations. Students say things like, "I have 25 years," instead of, "I am 25 years old." They translate word for word from their language and end up sounding awkward or wrong. And I realized she had been translating love the same way. Her actions didn't match the words she said. She was fluent in relationship, but she had translated it poorly into practice. By the time I reached my friend's apartment, I was numb. But for the first time in weeks, I felt free. Free from lies, free from betrayal, free from trying to correct someone who didn't want to be corrected. That night, I poured a glass of whiskey and called my best friend. He didn't ask what happened. He just let me talk. I recounted everything. The couch, the chips, the laughter, the lies, the false friends, the mispronunciations. It felt good to say it out loud, to let it exist somewhere outside my head. And for the first time, I stopped blaming myself. The first few weeks after leaving were a haze. I threw myself into work, grading papers, correcting mistakes, and explaining grammar rules with a mechanical precision that almost felt therapeutic. Each student's error reminded me of the errors in my own life. The misunderstandings, the miscommunications, the ignored red flags. I started making a list in my journal, the 10 most common mistakes students make in English, and how to correct them. It felt strangely cathartic, like I was finally putting my own chaos into order. Incorrect verb tenses. I go yesterday. I went yesterday. Articles confusion. I saw a sun. I saw the sun. Prepositions mix-ups. I am good in math. I am good at math. Plural versus singular. She have cats. She has cats. Confusing words. He's sensible. He is sensible. False friends. Actually, I am very sensible. Actually, I am very sensitive. Pronunciation errors. Beach versus bitch. Overusing very, very, very big, huge. Direct translations. I have 25 years. I am 25 years old. Subject, verb agreement. She go to school. She goes to school. Writing it all down, I realized I was learning something too. Mistakes can be corrected, but only if both parties are willing to learn. You can't force someone to fix what they don't see is broken. By the end of that week, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in months, clarity. And even though my heart still ached, I finally understood that some lessons aren't just about grammar. They're about life, trust, and the painful process of letting go. One evening, a week later, I ran into her at a cafe. My stomach dropped before my brain even caught up. She smiled at me like nothing had happened. I forced a polite nod, but inside, I was a storm. She asked, "How are you?" I laughed, quietly, bitterly. "Better than I expected." "You." Her face faltered, just for a second. And in that second, I realized something important. Closure doesn't come from apologies. Closure comes from noticing the patterns, understanding the mistakes, and deciding not to repeat them. It reminded me of my students again. One of them mixed up borrow and lend. You see, they sound simple, but if you confuse them, the whole sentence collapses. Relationships are the same way. One small misunderstanding, left unchecked, can ruin everything. I said, I'm teaching a class on common mistakes in English. Maybe you'd like to audit it. She blinked. Why? Because maybe it'll help you understand what went wrong. And she left without another word. I watched her go, a strange mix of satisfaction and sorrow rising in my chest. I realized then that I didn't need her to learn. I needed myself to. For the first time, I truly felt free. After that encounter, I threw myself into my work completely. I started holding extra tutoring sessions, focusing not just on grammar, but on the small, subtle mistakes that trip students up. Watching them grasp a concept, finally say a sentence correctly, it was like watching someone heal. And slowly, I healed too. I could laugh again. I could talk about my life without feeling like a victim. I even started writing little notes to myself, reminders about the 10 most common mistakes, but also reminders about life lessons. Don't overuse vary. Learn the difference between borrow and lend. Don't translate directly. Pay attention to small details, they matter. Don't let hesitation become permanent. Trust actions, not words alone. Understand patterns before judging. Correct mistakes gently, not angrily. Accept that some errors are irreversible. Keep moving forward. It was ironic, in a way. All those years teaching English, I thought I was just helping students. But really, I was teaching myself how to recover from betrayal, how to forgive, not them, not me, but life. By the end of the month, I realized I could even see her without pain. I didn't want her back. I didn't even want to be angry. I just wanted to live, to learn, and to keep correcting my own mistakes along the way. Looking back, I see now that everything, every heartbreak, every betrayal, every misstep, was a lesson disguised as pain. Leaving her wasn't just about ending a relationship. It was about learning to recognize mistakes, both in language and in life, and knowing when to correct them and when to walk away. I learned that communication isn't just about words. It's about timing, intention, and action. Mispronounce a word in English, and people might misunderstand you. Miscommunicate in love, and people can hurt you irreversibly. Here's the advice I'd give anyone in a similar situation. Pay attention to the signs. Don't ignore hesitation. Trust actions more than words. Accept that some mistakes can't be corrected. Learn from every error, whether it's, I have 25 years, or a betrayal. Keep moving forward. Life is a language. You learn a little every day, and perfection isn't the point. I still teach English, still correct students, but now I also teach them about resilience, patience, and awareness. I tell them, mistakes are normal, and correcting them is powerful, but knowing when to let go is life-changing. And for me, I finally understand that sometimes the most painful lessons are also the most valuable.